Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Flourish Podcast. So glad you joined us again. We are continuing our conversation with the super smart, super talented Shawn Wells, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, no, I can formulate that with you. Like, that's the thing. Like, I've formulated bars, cookies, pizzas, anti-aging serums, pet products, proteins, pre-workouts, energy drinks, protein drinks, capsules, tablets, sublinguals, transdermals. I've done all different types of packaging that has Bluetooth and bamboo and glass and lights on it. Like, I mean, you name it. Like,
okay, now you gotta give me the wildest. Like, okay, how cool would this be? He's gonna make the next alcohol without the negative side effects. And he's formulated stuff with pizza before. Mm-hmm. What if you had a pizza that could give you a buzz with no hangover? And you didn't feel like crap in the morning.
That would be wonderful. I like it.
Okay, what's the craziest thing you've ever put together or formulated? The most wild off the wall?
The most wild and off the wall. I'm thinking about, like, well, what's cool recently is I'm working with a lot of healthcare practitioners, HCP kind of category, where they're willing to spend a lot more. Like, I would say it's very common to have like $6 to $10 COGS. That means cost of goods sold. So like the build of the product is $6 to $10. They sell it to you for 30 to 40, but there's often like the middleman that's involved in this process. And so, they might, $6 to $10 product might sell for 12 to 20, and then the next level, 36, whatever it is.
Right.
But I've been getting doctors coming to me wanting to like work on high-end concierge style supplements that are like literally $25 COGS, which is insane.
Yeah.
Like, I have never, like in my whole career, I've never had stuff like this where I'm creating like stuff that will really move the needle in one capsule to where you'll see it. And that's the thing, like these doctors are testing it in all the ways. They want to see it in the blood work, and they have patients that are willing to spend $100, $150 on a supplement that's super effective versus kind of where we've been stuck at with the Swansons or Now Foods, like, around $30 in a Walmart or Costco or whatever. We're seeing supplements like really take this huge jump, certainly in this kind of concierge functional medicine realm. And that has me really excited because I'm making like dream supplements now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I mentioned oral health. I am a dentist. Mm-hmm. What do you see as really important, and if any of them are yours, obviously more the better, supplements that would benefit oral health?
Supplements that would benefit oral health. That's a great question. Like, one of the things I really want to work on is not just gut microbiome, but also like skin microbiome and the oral microbiome. Mm-hmm. So I do believe that I've kind of been on the fence about probiotics. And this is really interesting because you might be like, what? Probiotics are amazing. I don't dislike probiotics, but what I think is like maybe the best way is to focus on prebiotics, where you're kind of making the body be intelligent and figure out what it needs, and then postbiotics, where you're giving additional substrate of what the probiotics make, which is the butyrate. Mm-hmm. So what I really like from a gut microbiome and maybe oral microbiome standpoint, there's something called Pre4 Pro. It's a branded phage. A phage is like a really interesting type of prebiotic where it actually consumes the quote unquote bad bacteria and uses that as a fuel to grow the probiotics. And which is really, really cool. So phage means to eat.
Would that be different than a bacteriocin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be.
What would,
So this is like a really, interesting approach. Like a lot of times these short chain fibers are considered prebiotics, but if you have a dysbiotic gut, or in this case, let's say mouth, it can potentially just increase the amount of dysbiosis. And I think a lot of people get this when they take some of these prebiotic, fibers or supplements that like they actually get more gas and, things like that. And that can be from the prebiotics. And if I was to pick a probiotic, like DE111 is probably one of my favorites. It's a stable spore-based one. And actually this company, Deerland, is the ones who make both the Pre4 Pro and the DE111. So I really like this company and the research that they do. And then I actually have come to the market with the postbiotic in its optimized form. It's a triglyceride of the short chain fatty acid butyrate, and it's called tributyrin. And so those things are really powerful. And I do think, we've talked about using some things like that can be antibiotic if needed to maybe kind of cleanse. And those could be things like colloidal silver, oregano, garlic, which is maybe like where like some of this kind of Dracula stuff even comes from, actually. Like I've often thought about that as being like this bloodborne disease that, there's always like truth and myth, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then like tea tree oil we've talked about. So like some of these things could be really interesting to kind of, work with the microbiome, and then you kind of reseed after, not reseed as in like reduce, but like adding more seeds.
Yep.
You can add those like maybe after you do kind of the cleaning, maybe add the probiotic and the postbiotic and possibly the whole three. All three are actually called symbiotics when you use pre, pro, and post. It's actually called a symbiotic. And what's really interesting now is there's a whole area of these probiotics and really the collective of symbiotics that if they're working on the cognitive function, they're called psychobiotics. And so there's a lot of research now because the majority of neurotransmitters are actually in your gut. About 80% of your neurotransmitters are in your gut. So a lot of like your brain health and brain activity and mood is related to your gut health. And I think people are not really clear on that. And like actually like when you're more at the fetus level, like the gut and the brain, we talk about gut brain axis, but the two are actually like combined and they kind of spread apart over time as the fetus grows. But so that's really interesting as well. There's a huge area of research going into psychobiotics.
Very cool. Very cool. What correlations do you see between dental health? Because I know you have some stories around this too, around dental health and mental health.
Man, I mean, I can tell you like as far as mental health from the standpoint of lack of confidence to do with your smile. I mean, that's significant, and that can't be underestimated. It's not just vanity. Like I knocked out my front tooth when I was a child, and I had a very like misshapen plastic cap that was had a weird color, weird shape, and that affected my smile growing up greatly. And I was very embarrassed about the way it looked in pictures, the way I looked in person. And then I was playing basketball in college, and someone elbowed me and knocked that cap out and the post, and it split the root, and I ended up having to wear a flipper. And I remember that tooth breaking sometimes, and like at one time I was on a spring break, and this, broke at the beginning of spring break. I went the whole time without, front tooth.
Without a tooth.
And
how old were you then?
About 25. I mean, I was like 8 years old when it first happened with the plastic cap. So I had to go through a lot of procedures related to that. And then I ended up having like a number of root canals and like not understanding like why that's happening. And then I was like, okay, like I'm doing all this like work on TV and all these things. I'm like, I'm going to get veneers. Like I want a beautiful smile. I've gone my whole life without a beautiful smile. I've been embarrassed about my smile. And I did not realize like the degree to which they shave down your teeth. That was like, it was already too late in the process when I realized how bad that was. When I looked at my teeth, like what was left, like after they shaved them down, it looks horrific. It's hard to explain to someone that hasn't seen it, but it's a horror show, and it like is traumatizing when you're already traumatized about the way your smile looks.
Yeah.
And then you put on these teeth, and then mine would. The person I was working with was not very good, and they kept falling off. And I would be out at dinners, I would be at speaking engagements, and they would fall off. I mean, front teeth too. And it was just playing into my trauma. And, I'd keep going back. They'd keep trying different, glues and adhesives and, creating like this rough surface and the whole thing. And of course, there's massive amounts of pain with all of this stuff. Like, then I've literally had hundreds of dental procedures, and it's very traumatizing. Like to think about all this pain, all the complication. I just want to have a nice smile. And then I had to go through a lot with the Invisaligns, and I ended up getting, because of this front tooth, and there's like gum resorption, where they put the post and all this, you can actually kind of see the post through the gum. They did the best they could with it, but I've gotten, it got infected essentially. And, this is when I was like septic, and I didn't realize. I was on a trip, and like my heart rate was like, staying at like 180. My blood pressure was like 170 over 120. Like, I was like, and then I was in the hospital, and I couldn't figure out what's going on. And this whole, front gum was just loaded with bacteria, and it was septic. And so, all of this stuff, like when I came to see you, is just highly traumatizing, because I never felt comfortable with my teeth and feeling like it's, it should be like a source of pride, like the focus of your face, like the smile that you project, like the speaking that you do is like through your mouth, through your teeth, like it's speaking your truth. Mm-hmm. And I find myself like kind of hiding away. I got really good at like, covering my teeth because I would have teeth fall out all the time. I got really good at like, like putting a hand over my mouth when I talked, like, I'm holding back the fullest version of me. And so this is like, anyone listening to this, like I can say like I empathize with struggles you've had with teeth. And this is where, you and your work are very important, and where I found you, and I really resonate with you.
Well, thank you. I wasn't expecting you to go through this story, but I know without a doubt that so many people will benefit from that story. So I so appreciate that. And you have a great smile.
No, thank you.
And it does. That's how you shine through, is when you can smile and feel free in your smile and not feel inhibited in your smile.
Yeah.
And, we were talking earlier over lunch, some people just don't have an appreciation for how close the mouth is to the rest of the body in terms of really serious acute infections like that. And it can absolutely, a tooth can put you in the hospital. And so I am glad that you said that from your perspective, because it's usually not at a really convenient time when it happens. You were traveling and you were out of the country too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So you weren't
yeah.
even in the States. So in a foreign country, and I always tell people, Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong, either on your family or when you're out of town. And so we want to make sure that we have an appreciation for oral health all along the way. But, like you said, another thing that I hope that parents understand too is that it is so impactful what happens to your kids' teeth when they're little. When they're little, you had this accident happen to you when you were 8 years old. And because of that, it kind of led down this road of dental care after dental care after dental care. And unfortunately, bad experience after bad experience.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, it's not always that way. And there are a lot of really good dentists out there who do amazing work and can minimize pain and discomfort where possible. But it absolutely, it statistically speaking, if I do a filling on a permanent tooth on a 6-year-old, statistically speaking, I've condemned that person to lose that tooth in their lifetime because nothing lasts forever. And as you know, even good dental work doesn't last forever. And so you're going to have to repeat that dental work. So the more that we can do to help parents prevent issues in their kiddos and help people see the importance of these things, I think is such a valuable message to hear from an adult who's been through it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, exciting stuff. You speak quite a bit about, this is a perfect segue, talking about trauma, because we deal with a lot of trauma. We're all in some sort of, I think, trauma recovery in some form or fashion. All of us are. We all have different levels of trauma that we have to experience and deal with. And one very, I think, really exciting and interesting area of research and medicine is in the use of psychedelics to deal with trauma, with increasing creativity in all kinds of therapeutic ways. And I know you have spoken on this quite a bit. So tell me just a little bit of what would you see as the benefits of psychedelics therapeutically, and where do you see this going in the next 5 to 10 years?
I see them getting legalized quite a bit. We're seeing like certain states like Colorado, Oregon in particular, but I think we'll see a lot more. A lot of them are on the docket where I would say, the next 2 to 5 years, I would expect that most states to all states will see things like psilocybin, MDMA be legalized through clinical channels. We already have ketamine legalized through clinical channels. And again, there's certain applications where some things are already legalized, like end-of-life care, palliative care. So I think that'll just get broadened. And then I think their acceptance and understanding will continue to grow as well. I think we've gotten away from this stigma of them being hippie, recreational, escapist, druggy drugs to mind-enhancing entheogens is the word, where it's like really enhancing your ability to sense the spiritual. I think there clearly is a world that is beyond this three-dimensional veil. Wherever you land spiritually, like now that we're studying the quantum, there is so much more that's there that's really difficult to define and truly understand. And it may take a long time before we do. There's a lot of quantum science that's going on, certainly right now, but whether our minds have the capacity to understand. Like if I was to try and explain like 12 dimensions to you, your brain wouldn't be able to understand it.
Right.
And I'm not saying you, I'm saying like all of us
definitely.
collectively, we just can't envision it and understand how that works. So I think there's a lot more to the universe than we currently understand. And there is a sense of connection to the universe that can come through on these psychedelics that is powerful, where I think we have a tendency, especially when we believe that when we're depressed, we believe that we're alone. We're alone in this. And there's so many people dealing with depression, PTSD, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and clearly we're not alone. But this is the belief. And when you can connect to God, to source, to universe, whatever you want to call it, and kind of connect to the oneness of it all, there is an inner peace that comes through. There's a loneliness evaporates, and you realize your purpose and your potential. And there's just something powerful that comes through with that. Further, if you do have trauma, and really all of us have trauma, whether it's micro or macro trauma, and trauma can be too much too fast and too little too slow. So some people think, trauma is only like rape and murder and, all the like really intense things, mm-hmm. but it can also be neglect, right? So what's powerful with these entheogens, these psychedelics, is that you will get into a place of neuroplasticity where you enhance the ability for the brain to rewire itself. And when we're depressed, we tend to be very fragile mentally, like anti-resilient mentally. So actually BDNF, that protein associated with neuroplasticity, is very low. And also a number of the neurotransmitters are very low. So your body is saying, like, we don't want to be taking in more information. We don't want to be having more feeling. And it's really protecting itself from further trauma. But in this space, those are all turned back on. The neuroplasticity, the neurotransmitters are turned back on, and your ego is turned down. Default mode network is turned off. So this allows you to see the truth versus like a filtered, reframed version like of the egoic truth. So when you pair those two things together, it makes change, like radical change, possible in a way that's just not possible through therapy typically.
Right. Do you have any supplements that you're formulating around psychedelics?
I do. I've actually worked on protocols like stacks that are pre, peri, post ceremony or journey or whatever you want to call this experience, as well as microdosing protocols. So that's microdosing is like when it's sub-perceptual, mm-hmm. meaning like there's nothing happening that you're feeling. It's usually about 1/10 of the dose. Mm-hmm. And this is like, this kind of change takes place over time, like over like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. It's not as like this expansive single experience, like a journey or a ceremony. So that's also popular and very interesting. So I have protocols around those things. And in particular, I've been working on the idea of neuroplasticity. A lot of the polyphenols, which when you look at like the blue zones where people live the longest, their diets are very high in polyphenols, and polyphenols are closely associated with neuroplasticity. So things like resveratrol from grapes and red wine, pterostilbene with blueberries, catechins with green tea and cacao, quercetin with onions and apples. There's what is it? FISSN with strawberries, apigenin with parsley. So anyway, these are all very powerful compounds. But actually the one that I've found to be the most powerful is kind of gray market. Like I really want to bring it out, but it's mainly on like these nootropic sites, and it's called 7,8-dihydroxyflavone. And then there's a metabolite of that called 4-dimethylamino or DMA 7,8 dihydroxyflavone. So I know that's a lot.
You're bringing me back to organic chemistry. It's giving me PTSD.
But those ingredients are really powerful at increasing BDNF. So those are super interesting. And I think post-journey or post-ceremony, that could be very powerful at staying in a neuroplastic state to continue to make the changes that came up during your expansive experience.
I love it. Love it. So I know, right? So you have a book that is not about supplements specifically, called The Energy Formula.
Yes.
It talks about all kinds of things. You go from all of your vulnerable stories about bullying, anorexia, mono, orthorexia, a brain tumor. What motivated you to write this book? Who is it for? Because for one, it's amazing. Your stories are amazing. I know you've got probably 1,000 more that could have gone in the book. So tell me what this book is really for and what does it mean to you?
Yeah, I think I spent a lot of time like biohacking in that kind of masculine energy of like greater performance, and like I was killing myself in the process, and I wanted to find like better ways to get more performance while not killing myself. But that is not a very healthy mindset to be in. So, I was finding all the supplements, peptides, like whatever, these injectables, like what can I get that like elicits greater performance cognitively, physically, allows me to do more, less sleep. This is a very like unhealthy way of being. And I was definitely burning the candle at both ends. And I got very good at biohacking, but I also got sick a lot, very sick, as you alluded to, with like brain tumors and autoimmune conditions and all these things. My body would just shut down.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I did my psychedelic journey, my first experience, where I found out I could be loved, I could have love, that that wasn't like, love wasn't conditional, that, and it sounds so obvious to say, like, but these things, like once you feel them and anchor them in these spaces, like it becomes your truth. Like I could hear it logically and go, yep. But I didn't know these things to be true. Like I was always seeking external validation. I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And that's what created this relentless drive. And I don't hate that part of me, because it got me here. It got me all the accomplishments that you see. Like there was good in me along the way, but it was also a relentless drive that was consuming me and killing me. And I do think if I didn't do that journey, that I would already be dead. Yeah. So I'm very thankful for the psychedelics. And so the book like goes into all the biohacks, certainly that work like on that kind of more what I'd call like the masculine energy, if you will, of like, peptides and supplements and, these different devices and red light and all the stuff, like the keto and fasting, and awesome. But then I also get into mindsets and more the feminine energy of self-care with like grounding and breath work and ecstatic dance and primal flow and journaling and these kinds of things that are ancient wisdom on how to live a better and balanced life. We need to live in that yin and yang, the masculine and feminine, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Like it shouldn't be hustle and grind, it should be hustle and flow. Like we should have sometimes that masculine go get it energy, the hustle, but we need to like, the goal should be like a flow state, like where I believe like you're in sympathetic and parasympathetic, where you're both relaxed and stimulated. And that's like the ideal place to be. That's where like play lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you feel like you've found balance now, or are you still catching yourself? Okay, too much hustle. Okay, too much rest.
I tend to, just through decades of conditioning, get too much into too much hustle.
Yeah.
and then get into states of overwhelm. So I have learned to keep going back to my tools. And it's something I continue to work on and improve at. But it's very easy for me to, I think because I'm kind of a polymath where I'm very like creative and scientific and I'm ambidextrous and I'm good at a lot of things. And so like, can I do that? Yes. Could I do it well? Yes. Can you do all these things well? No. That saying no is very hard for me. And that is the key. Like self-love starts with the word no. Creating boundaries, I think is very important. And I have not done a great job at that through my life.
Well, you're at least quite a few years farther along than I am in being able to say no. So we'll have you back and just talk all about saying no and finding balance because I'm not there yet. And I love all of the info in the book. I feel like it's all so aligned scientifically, biochemically with how I practice and what we do in the practice. But biohacking changes so fast. Mm-hmm. Is there anything, like if you had to update the book today, it's not that old, but if you had to update the book today, what would you add or what would you emphasize even more?
Well, I think I was proud of, like I was telling you, I recorded the book and I thought it was decent, but I added like more story, more cohesiveness, and I think there's more connection through me saying like, I've been through this. Yeah. Like, here's where this is coming from. Instead of me preaching from the mountain of me being so much better than you. No, I've been suicidal. I've had anxiety. I've had my teeth fall out. I've had brain tumors and I've been anorexic and I couldn't get out of bed for 6 months and I've been morbidly obese and like I've been through a lot of stuff. So I'm not better than anyone. This is just my hero's journey. And I'm like showing you like, you don't have to go through all this like I did. And that would be wonderful if I can help even one person avoid that path. So I love that I've added the stories, and then I did add a lot on mindset, which has really shifted for me of being like so much more important. And I think I'd even put more of that in now of really granting yourself grace, allowing yourself to make mistakes, because I believe I saw this data from the 60s with NASA that like they assessed genius with 5-year-olds by creativity. Like how curious and creative they are. Mm-hmm. And they noticed that 98% of 5-year-olds were curious and creative. And then when they looked 5 years later, it was down to 30%. And then they looked 5 years later and it was down to 15%. And then they looked at adults and it was down to 2%. And this is because of traditional schooling, they believe, that it kind of works the curious and creative out of us. For sure. So I believe that like when we're okay with making mistakes, when we're explorative and experimental, then there's more curiosity and creativity. So the idea of making a mistake being bad is the anti-genius formula. And a mistake being what it is, and quite often leading to breakthroughs and innovations and some of the world's greatest inventions. That is the genius formula.
Oh, I like that. I like it. It's tweetable or Xable. So what are you up to next? What is occupying your time? What projects are you really excited about?
I have, with Mind Valley, they have several million followers. It's like a masterclass for wellness, mentally and physically. It's kind of like a betterment platform. I'm releasing a masterclass essentially on supplements. They call it a quest. And so that's coming out soon. I just filmed a documentary called Biohack Yourself, and a bunch of biohackers are in it with actually RFK Jr., Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, Vishen Lakhiani, like Aubrey Marcus, a bunch of really great people are in it. Hey, puppies. And so I'm very excited about that coming out. And then I'm actually doing a whole course on my book, The Energy Formula, this year. So we're working on that. And I mean, there's tons more ingredients and supplement products coming out. So there's a lot to watch out for. My social media is growing. I'm not only doing it for myself, but now I'm starting to do it for a lot of other supplement companies. So that's been really fun to grow my team and do collaborative work. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming.
Awesome. Awesome. Very cool. Well, what's one question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
My favorite book.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
The 4 Agreements. It really changed my life. If you have anyone listening that hasn't read it, I have probably read it like 20 times, listened to it 20 times. Like, this book just was profound for me, just working myself out of like a dark space and really understanding. The 4 Agreements themselves are very beautiful, but the book also talks about that we make agreements through our lives by accepting things to be true. So if someone calls you stupid or ugly or whatever, like, we make an agreement and say, yes, this is true. And, you know, over your life, it can be conditioned, and then we tend to project these agreements out on other people. And so this is like a really powerful book for me, and it really led to a lot of my transformation. So I would definitely recommend that book. Some other ones I love is Simon Sinek's Start With Your Why.
Yes.
That's a great one. And then The Obstacle Is the Way, if you like Stoicism by Ryan Holiday. Those are some excellent books that I love.
Awesome. Love it. Love it. And one parting word of wisdom for our audience. What would you like people to come away with?
To be explorative, to be curious. I believe genius is associated with curiosity, which is associated with playfulness, which is associated with grace, which means make mistakes, get messy, get dirty, play, enjoy life, stop being so rigid, stop believing that mistakes are bad, and I think joy will come through the other side.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Shawn Wells, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we did this. Everybody, that is all for today's episode.